Hello and welcome, I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top headlines of the hour. The world waits as President Trump considers military options against Iran as protest deaths rise to 2,000 and clerical rule faces its biggest challenge in decades. Meanwhile, Iran says it is maintaining contact with US envoys. President Trump says any country doing business with Tehran will face a 25% tariff on all trade with the United States. China, Iran's largest trading partner, says it will respond accordingly. Danish and Greenland officials are set to meet US leaders J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio at the White House on Wednesday. The talks come as Denmark's defence minister also meets NATO chief Rutte amid rising tensions over a possible US move on Greenland. Hungary will hold a general election on April the 12th as Prime Minister Viktor Orban faces his toughest challenge in years. The Hungarian President Tamás Szolnok confirms the voting date as the EU's longest-serving leader faces a vote in a weak position. The United Nations calls for a swift, independent investigation into the fatal shooting of 37-year-old Renee Good by an ICE officer in Minneapolis. UN rights officials say international law only permits deadly force as a last resort and urges transparency in the case. Taiwan says a general consensus is reached with the US on a trade pact after months of talks. Reports say US tariffs may drop to 15% in exchange for new TSMC investment. Syria's army orders Kurdish forces to withdraw from areas east of Aleppo after deadly clashes last week. State TV says the zone is now a closed military area and all armed groups must move east of the Euphrates. A Russian drone attack kills at least 4 people and wounds 6 in Ukraine's northeastern city of Kharkiv. The strike comes hours after Washington accuses Moscow of a dangerous escalation as peace talks remain distant. We start this hour with the unfolding situation in Iran. And meanwhile, during a visit to India, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz has addressed the ongoing unrest, expressing concern over escalating violence against protesters in Iran. Merz has warned that a government relying on force solely to maintain power risks its survival, signalling that Tehran's clerical authorities could be nearing the end of their rule. Let's listen in to the statements.
Mich besorgen im Augenblick die Nachrichten über eine immer höhere Gewaltbereitschaft der Polizei, der sogenannten Revolutionsgarden in Iran gegen die eigene Bevölkerung. Ich will die Gelegenheit nutzen, noch einmal das Mullah-Regime aufzufordern, diese Gewalt sofort einzustellen. Wenn sich ein Regime nur noch mit Gewalt an der Macht halten kann, dann ist es faktisch am Ende. Ich gehe davon aus, dass wir jetzt hier auch gerade die letzten Tage und Wochen dieses Regimes sehen.
Meanwhile, Iranian judicial authorities have reportedly moved to strengthen their response to the unrest. Special court divisions have been established to handle cases of those accused of rioting and terrorism. Moreover, Iranian authorities have blamed foreign actors, while Tehran's foreign minister has said that several armed elements appeared among protesters. The United Nations has also weighed in, with the human rights chief strongly voicing his concerns at the mounting violence against peaceful demonstrators. Let's listen in.
We are horrified by the mounting violence directed by security forces at protesters across Iran, as reports indicate hundreds have been killed and thousands arrested. The killing of peaceful demonstrators must stop. The labelling of protesters as terrorists to justify violence against them is unacceptable. We urge the Iranian authorities to halt immediately all forms of violence and repression against peaceful protesters and to restore full access to the internet and telecommunications services. We're getting information from various sources on the ground. These are reliable sources. The number that we're hearing is hundreds, and that's what's been reported. I cannot give you a precise, verified number. That's not possible. We're just not in.
Professor Rohan Gunaratne joins us now, an international affairs expert joining us live from Singapore. Professor Gunaratne, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. Of course, we are now seeing the world respond to the information coming out of Iran. Of course, information is being drip-drabbed to the international press. However, now thousands are feared dead in Iran's protest crackdown, along now with an internet blackout that's lasted over 80 hours. State TV there says that these protests are calming down. Do you believe that the momentum is keeping up in the country, despite these devastating reports coming out of Iran, of the sheer brutality of the way that the local security forces are dealing with these demonstrations?
Thomas, the last 48 hours, I have reviewed the footage and also the photographs that have been transmitted out of Iran using Starlink and other platforms, because there's an internet blackout. But based on that imagery, I come to the conclusion that the Iranian regime elements are using brute force against the protesters. As you rightly said, more than 1,000 protesters have been killed, maimed, and injured, and these protests are going to escalate. I do not see a decrease in protests. Also, this protest is an organic protest. It is something that brew because of the situation in Iran, the economic situation. It will only worsen because the international community is also very keen that the Ayatollah Khomeini regime is replaced by a secular regime. So I believe that these protests will grow every day until there is a regime change.
And we've had a bold claim from the German Chancellor saying that we are witnessing the final days of the regime. If that is to be true, what options lay ahead for the Iranian people?
The Western security and intelligence assessment that the German Chancellor shared is very accurate. There is no way for this regime to rule continuously, but it is likely that it may go on the protests may go on for several days or several weeks. But certainly 80% of the Iranian people are now opposed to the regime, and also Iranians who are living outside. We have seen demonstrations both in continental Europe, in the UK, in the United States, in Canada, against the Iranian regime. So I don't think that this regime can last over the long term. Certainly it can survive in the immediate term by applying force, but Trump himself is very determined to use military force against the Iranian regime in the event they continue to harm the protesters.
And what could be the outcomes of that, Professor Gunaratne? Of course, we've also heard Iran say that they will indeed retaliate against both Israel and United States military bases in the region. Does that not spiral into a more regional war?
Iranian government has restored and rebuilt a lot of its capabilities after the Israel-Iran war, and also after the United States attacked the Iranian nuclear sites. But again, those capabilities are not the same level as the capabilities Iran had before the Israel-Iran war. So there could be limited strikes based on their current capabilities. But if you look at the US and the Israeli capabilities, Iran has no chance. So there could be a war, but it will be a short and a swift war where eventually the Iranian regime will lose the fight.
And what about the Iranian people? We've seen some of those leaked video footages of body bags lining the streets. Of course, the Iranian people are going through economic woes and now violence. What can you tell us about the humanitarian situation in the country?
The situation on the ground has worsened, as you rightly said. We have seen very significant deaths, not only on the streets, but almost every hospital has dead and injured people. And of course, the Iranian government has taken very extreme measures to control these protesters using brute force. And of course, their criminal justice and the prison system has voiced that they will pass death penalty for some of the protesters. So I think that all these measures, all these developments are not going to help the Iranian regime of the Ayatollahs to hold on to power. It's a question of time that the mullahs will go home and the existing regime that has been in power since 79 will be replaced. There will be this regime, the days, as the German Chancellor said, are numbered. And I think that the worst case scenario is that it will take a few more weeks, but it is a protest that Iran is unable to reverse.
Professor Gunaratne, do stay with us. Of course, we'll continue to inform our viewers of all the developments coming out of that situation. We move now next over to Syria, and the army has ordered Kurdish forces to withdraw from a wide area east of Aleppo, declaring it a closed military zone after deadly clashes in the city last week. State television aired a military statement instructing all armed groups to pull back east of the Euphrates River. The restricted zone stretches from near Dai Haifa, around 50 kilometers east of Aleppo, and extends further east and south. The move comes after Damascus accused the Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces of sending reinforcements to the region, a claim the group has denied. Government troops were seen deploying artillery and additional forces near Deir Haifa. The escalation follows the government's takeover of Kurdish neighborhoods in Aleppo after negotiations broke down over integrating Kurdish forces into the new state structure. Professor Gunaratne joins us once again. Aleppo has been a focal point where violence has continued even after the fall of Bashar al-Assad in December of 2024. Why does this area of Aleppo, this city of Aleppo, matter so much?
City of Aleppo has been a stronghold of the Kurdish forces, and also we have seen that the Kurds played the most important role in the defeat of ISIS, and there are many governments that support the Kurds. So I think that Aleppo will remain a very important stronghold.
And of course, how does this fit into this region in particular? Syria and al-Shara's new government plan to stabilize Syria, a new Syria, if you will, one that is allied with the West.
Ahmad al-Shara will have to be human rights friendly. Right now, he is not. He has attacked the Druze, he has attacked the Shiites or the Alawites. Now he's attacking the Kurds. So there is a lot of unhappiness.
Professor Gunaratne, thank you very much. Unfortunately, we've run out of time, but it's always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you very much for joining us. We now move on over to Europe for our next story. And Denmark and Greenland's foreign ministers will meet US Vice President J.D. Vance and Secretary of State Marco Rubio. The meeting follows renewed interest from US President Donald Trump in acquiring Greenland, an autonomous territory under the Kingdom of Denmark. Danish Foreign Minister Lars Løkke Rasmussen and Greenlandic counterpart Vivian Motzfeldt requested the talks amid Trump's recent push. Trump first suggested a US takeover of the Arctic island in 2019, but the idea faces opposition in Washington, including from members of his own party. Joining us now to discuss this is Mark Sutherland. He's a geopolitical commentator. He joins us live from London. Mark, pleasure speaking to you, and thank you very much for joining us. Of course, this is quite a large development. We've heard some provocative statements coming out of the White House. Donald Trump keeping things shrouded in mystery when it comes to US action and what he's going to do. Of course, not something that NATO allied Denmark really appreciated very much. But of course, this meeting could be seen as significant. Does this show that Donald Trump's military takeover isn't going to be as direct as others thought it was going to be?
Thomas, good to be with you again. As always, President Trump, in his own way, that other leaders find difficult to deal with how he then pronounces himself and comes out with various comments. He then begins to get things moving, and as we always say here, you and I, it's better than people that actually sit down and have a conversation and a good within that diplomatic framework. They, understandably, the Americans are very concerned about their country's security. And in regard to Russia and China, we come back to this, the bipolar world and people wanting a bipolar world, China and Russia do, and not just one hegemony that America wants to then keep. But I think this is significant, and also various other comments have been made, as you've said and others, that of course America, member of NATO, this isn't how fellow NATO members should behave. But if it gets people to the table, now how this goes, does it mean they end up leasing Greenland? And of course Greenland is a protectorate under Denmark. So there is a lot of things to discuss, but we have to bear in mind whether they are saying it so openly or not. But America is deeply concerned about its security in that geographical part of the world. Thomas.
Well, of course, Mark, Greenland is home for nearly 60,000 people, 57,000, I believe the number is. And over 50% of the country, of course, support their own independence, complete independence from Greenland, and 85% don't want to be part of the United States. How's the Trump administration going to tackle with that conundrum?
I think that conundrum will be taken head on in conversations. At the end of the day, the Americans have always, I believe, had a base there for a number of years. There's been people stationed there, fuel base as a previous name. They will then, I think this will be hashed out around the table. If it means, if we end up looking at jobs, how these people, indigenous people there can then be looked after, etc. There is plenty of things to discuss in this way, and of course, part of that discussion will be explaining the geopolitical landscape and what is changing, what. At times we are not privy to certain information that governments know, that the American administration are privy to, and they are definitely going along and concerned about their security. My advice, if I can say in my own humble way, is that they need to sit down and listen to the concerns of the people that are living within that territory, within Greenland. Whatever polls are said, let's just have some very good discussions and work this out. Also, security is also important to the people living there, Thomas, as well, to you.
And of course, Donald Trump, realistically, doesn't want to use military force against a NATO member. We're now seeing them arrange a meeting for them to sit and talk. However, why does Donald Trump let these be the headlines? Of course, there was, throughout the world, it's been the possibility of a NATO member attacking another NATO member, or at least violating its sovereignty. Why does Donald let this speculation gather?
Well, in his first administration, and then dealing with the European Union, beginning to address concerns over NATO, and at the beginning of his second administration, where he has really rattled the NATO cage, and even the head of NATO, Rutte, has turned around and said, "Look, President Trump, what you're saying is fair enough. We need to look at, in regard that we've relied on America to finance NATO for many years. We need to step up and pay our own way as well." Whatever people think, whether they do not like his style or his bumptiousness and all the rest, at the end of the day, he will then rattle the cage to get people to actually then talk to each other, to go in the direction that he thinks is important, and also in the best of America. And also, I would say, I excuse me, because of family links. He does love Europe and would like and wants the best for Europe, but he's also deeply concerned about what is going on and how it then conducts itself. Just finally, the other thing that we have to then remember, which is rather interesting in the makeup of NATO, is that Turkey is also a member as well.
Yeah.
So there's going to be issues in the long term and the short term with that. Thomas.
Yes, Mark, do stay with us as we move on to our next story, but we stay in Europe. And the French far-right leader, Marine Le Pen, is set to appear in the court to appeal a ruling that has barred her from standing for the elections for 5 years after defrauding the European Union. Those are the French parliamentary elections of 2027. Marine Le Pen was one of the several individuals from the National Rally Party who was found guilty of using EU parliamentary funds to pay for the party staff. The three-time presidential candidate was sentenced to 4 years in prison, out of which 2 have been fined for $100,000 and $16,000. Meanwhile, Marine Le Pen has responded. Let's take a listen into what she had to say.
Écoutez, j'espère pouvoir être entendu par la Cour d'appel.
En attendant, vous maintenez votre programme habituel.
D'esprit d'espérance, en quelque sorte.
Mark Sutherland joins us once again. Of course, Mark, the presidential election is over a year away, but this 4-year prison sentence would see Marine Le Pen, of course, barred from it for another 5 years before having to be eligible again. If Le Pen doesn't win this appeal, Jordan Bardella, of course, heading National Right under her, a lot of people are doubting his skills as a leader of the National Rally Party in France. How will this affect the National Rally Party going forward into that election next year?
We know that the elections are coming up in 2027. We also know that Macron will not be able to run again. There is a huge broader discussion to have on this and how the EU then conducts itself. We may get to that in a minute. But this will always be a concern for any party when you have a leader that you're able to then rally around. You know their history, you know their oratory, and how they then command the stage. And if comments are being made about that in regard to Bardella, then it's then understandable why people may make that comment. But also, as you know, within the press, if you are not wanting that particular party to win, then you will constantly try and then undermine it in the best way that you can by them publishing various articles of criticism. Thomas.
And Le Pen, of course, has been convicted for misusing EU funds by France's highest court, the Cour d'appel de Paris, my pronunciation, of course, for 4 million euros from the European Union. Her party, however, have argued that this is politically motivated. The justice system is targeting the opposition. We've heard this before, attacks from a far-right party, of course, on the judicial system of a state. What do you think of the position that her party is taking on this?
The issue is then is looking at the EU as a whole, which is full of fraud and corruption. If you have not been able to balance the books for many years, if at all, in regard to the accounts and sign them off. There's a very interesting book by Marta Andreasen, MEP, published 2009 that talks about this. And then she was drummed out because she was asked to sign the accounts off and then refused to do it. this is the body that we are dealing with. Why do European countries then pay VAT? People will then take things to the limit, and as a dear friend of mine explained once, that if you are supposed to be speeding within the legal limit of 30 miles an hour and you constantly push that to 32, 33, then in time authorities will then hold that against you and then will pull those levers at the right time. What am I saying? I'm saying this, that if Le Pen wants to take France out of the European Union, if that happens, then the European Union project is finished. Then people getting well paid and on a particularly gravy train that a number of people with incredible pensions that you and I could only dream of would then be over. They could just about cope with the fact that the UK voted in 2016 to leave. We as an island, even though our present Prime Minister is then seeking to take us in stealth by stealth, but that's another subject. If France goes, if Germany goes, then the EU project is finished, and that is important to certain individuals. The key is this, is that yes, you will then use lawfare to come against people over time that you know that if they could, they will then lead out. And it's very interesting when people use this sort of far right tag, if they then are saying, well, this is then populist, and all those tags are another discussion to then look at. But this is about the fraud. The sort of a fraudulent body in my humble opinion, and to then look at the gravy train and how that benefits people. And over time, the people within Europe, of course within the UK, outside London and in the regions, then they'd worked this out since 1973 for many years. Just thought the EU project is not benefiting us at all. So at the end of the day, it's about the EU as a bloc, as a body, politically then defending their position to say we want to carry on and we do not want anyone to step up and threaten that, and we will use whatever levers we can to stop that. Thomas.
Yes, Mark Sutherland, thank you very much for joining us. Pleasure to talk to you as always. We now move on to some further news, and astronomers have observed a white dwarf, a highly compact Earth-sized stellar ember that is creating a colourful shockwave as it moves through space, leaving them searching for an explanation. The highly magnetised white dwarf is gravitationally bound to another star in what it is called a binary system. The white dwarf is siphoning gas from its companion as the two orbit close to each other, and the system is located in the Milky Way, about 730 light years from Earth, relatively nearby in cosmic terms, in the constellation Augeia. The shockwave, more specifically a bow shock caused by the white dwarf, was observed using the European Southern Observatory's Chile-based Very Large Telescope. The shockwave was seen in an image released by the scientists, glowing in various colours produced when material flowing outward from the white dwarf collided with interstellar gas. In this shockwave, a red hue represented hydrogen, green represented nitrogen, and blue represented oxygen residing in interstellar space. White dwarfs are among the universe's most compact objects, though not as dense as black holes. But that's all that we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more international news updates.